curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And today, we're on the tugboat Teresa McAllister, which is one of the vessels helping to move the former USS John F. Kennedy, perhaps for the final time. Kennedy is about to leave the former Philadelphia Navy Yard on her way to the Scrapyard of Brownsville, Texas. We're finally starting to hit slack tide here, so the tugs are putting some pressure on the lines to start to pull her away from the pier. We've been sitting out here all morning as they disconnected the gangway and the lines. McAllister, of course, has a party on board Kennedy, including Captain Joe Benton, who was the person in charge of New Jersey's move. He's also moving Kennedy, one of the few ships in the area that's larger than us. You probably can't really tell on the camera, but she is starting to move aft. You can see Suzanne McAllister, which is another one of the tugboats that was involved in the move of New Jersey, along with the Teresa McAllister that we're on right now, has some pretty big tension on that line back aft. Suzanne is providing most of the propulsion and rudder function. This is a dead ship tow. Kennedy has been out of service since the early 2000s. She's been sitting here since around 2008, and so she's got none of her own propulsion or rudders functioning. So Suzanne McAllister is going to be providing that function as they pull her off. The other McAllister and Moran tugboats that you see around her are going to be giving nudges to assist in that effort. And then there's actually an ocean-going tugboat from a separate company that's going to come out and do the towing all the way down to Brownsville, Texas.
Why wasn't she saved? Why wasn't she saved? Why wasn't she in a museum?
Is that a question on
Yeah.
So Kennedy was, of course, on donation hold for a long time, particularly in the mid-2000s. There were multiple museum organizations that attempted to complete the application to get her as a museum ship. There were a couple of applications that were potential, but none of them were able to complete the application process. The Navy's application requires sorts of stuff, business plans, and a certain amount of fundraising, which is based on the size of the vessel and the projected cost of maintaining it, all the way to like, who's your curator, what's your collection plan going to be, that sort of stuff. If you're going to take this, you are going to be a museum. Anyway, Kennedy's sheer size, keep in mind she's about 200 feet longer and 150 feet wider than Battleship New Jersey. So her sheer size made it very difficult for those organizations to prove that they had the financial backing to be able to set her up as a museum. And it would be somewhat easier if they had the ship to say, hey, we've got this ship, we need donations. But just being able to say, hey, we want to get this ship, wasn't enough to raise the money to get what the Navy needed to see as seed funds for them to be able to operate as a museum. And we are, of course, basically one pier over from the dry dock the Battleship New Jersey was in, which means that we're back in the flight path of the Philadelphia International Airport. So every now and again, you'll get the real carrier aviator experience with the aircraft engine sound flying right over our heads.
Why is the number blacked out?
Was what?
The number blacked out.
Oh. So we just got a question on here. Why is the ship's number blocked out? Kennedy is, of course, CV-67, but that is now painted over. If she was still being held in reserve, whether that's donation hold or still in the mothball fleet here, her number would still be visible. But since she has been stricken from all the Navy lists and she's about to be scrapped, the Navy blacked out her hull numbers. So if you find yourself in the former Philadelphia Navy Yard and you're driving around the reserve basin looking at the inactive ships, you'll see that the Perry-class frigates, which are also awaiting final disposal, have had their hull numbers blacked out. But the littoral combat ships and the Ticonderoga-class cruisers have not, because they are in mothballs and could potentially be reactivated. Battleship New Jersey, of course, was reactivated from mothballs on 3 separate occasions. So, while more uncommon these days, it's not impossible.
Did they save any of her for historic purposes?
So we got a question, was anything saved off of Kennedy for historic purposes? And the answer is yes, many things. So, when she was originally decommissioned, I can't remember the year, early 2000s, I believe, but when she was originally decommissioned, Naval History and Heritage Command, the Navy's Curate Collection. Since then, the prospective crew of the new nuclear carrier, the Ford-class carrier John F. Kennedy, has been on several times, including within this past week, and they were taking parts off, documenting things. There were a bunch of murals that were painted on board, and I've heard that they even cut the entire bulkhead to get the murals off to mount them in the new Kennedy that's still under construction down in Newport News. And then, of course, museum ships were allowed on board. Back in 2018, when the efforts to turn Kennedy herself into a museum failed, and the Navy knew that they were going to be disposing of her, they opened her up to museum ships to come and take parts. So a number of things on Battleship New Jersey and some of the other ships that you go and visit are off of Kennedy. For example, the big eye binoculars on our bridge wings, I personally helped carry out of the ship's superstructure all the way down, which was quite heavy. And I can tell you that Kennedy's ladderways are no wider than New Jersey's and no less steep.
How long do you think scrap is going to take?
Kennedy is going to the exact same scrapyard that Kitty Hawk was at, and it took them probably about 2 years to get Kitty Hawk finished up, to get to the point where they had availability for Kennedy. The Navy, of course, sold both Kennedy and Kitty Hawk for, I think it was, a penny a piece. That is because the scrap value of the ships, the steel and the precious metals left on board, is likely going to be less than the cost of remediating the hazardous materials on board, the things like asbestos, PCBs, and lead paint. This carrier was, of course, built during the 60s and early 70s, if I remember correctly, so they were still using a lot of those components, and they were never fully remediated while the ship was in service. So sometimes the scrapyards take business like this that might not give them any sort of big return on investment, because when other contracts come up, the Navy might give them preferential treatment for that. Ships like Kennedy, of course, can only be scrapped here in the United States. There are scrapyards out there that would do it for cheaper and worry a lot less about remediating the hazardous material, a bunch of foreign yards, but our frontline capital ships like this, we're not going to send to be scrapped there. And that is doubly an issue for a ship like Kennedy, because some of the features of the subsequent class of carriers, the Nimitz class, CVN-68, was prototyped on her, including the layout of the engineering spaces. Now, Kennedy, of course, is a conventional aircraft carrier, not a nuclear carrier, and she, of course, started life as a Kitty Hawk class carrier, but she received so many modifications that some consider her her own class, and some of those modifications to her design were prototyping features that would be used on the subsequent Nimitz class, which of course is still our frontline class of carriers with, I believe there's 10 of them in active service right now. So letting foreign nationals get on board. Like when we stripped parts off of the ship, we were not even allowed in the engineering spaces because of the nature of them. So we certainly couldn't send her overseas to foreign nationals.
There's a new Kennedy.
There is a new Kennedy under construction right now in Newport News, Virginia. Her crew has been on board this Kennedy for some heritage trips. They've taken parts off. She's probably a couple of years away from being commissioned. It will not take as long to build her as Ford, the lead ship of the class, because Ford was in many ways the test bed of all the new systems.
So this is the last of the conventionals. Is it inevitable that everything moves to nuclear?
As of now, Kennedy is the last conventional supercarrier that the Navy ever built. All of the ones after her have been Nimitz class and now Ford class aircraft carriers. It is highly unlikely that any of those ships will ever be preserved as museums. With their nuclear reactors, it means that the Navy would have to cut open large parts of the ship from the flight deck all the way down to remove those, which then means that a large part of the ship has been destroyed. Some of the core parts of the ship that you would want on your museum tour. And it's unlikely that the Navy would ever give those ships up to be turned into museums. I'm hopeful that some of the amphibious carriers may one day be museums. They're approximately the same size as the Essex class carriers that have been successfully operated as museums. So there's a chance that they are a type of carrier and that they will be preserved in the future. But in terms of a super carrier like this, Kennedy was likely our last chance. It's doubly concerning for me to go down for scrap because the number of active carriers in the fleet continues to go down. From a peak of 15 super carriers during the Reagan administration at the end of the Cold War, down to, I think we're at 11 right now, the 10 Nimitzes and Ford. Keep in mind that for every 3 aircraft carriers you have, you only have 1 on deployment, which means that of those 11 carriers, we have 3 or 4 that we can send to a hotspot around the world, not 5 like the Reagan administration had. And more importantly, if something happens to one of those ships, if we get into a first-class shooting war, and to be fair, we haven't had a carrier versus carrier war since World War II. The Battle of Leyte Gulf was the last time that aircraft carriers fought each other in 1944.
Chain is still down.
Here at the bow, you can see there's a chain hanging down in the water. That's not attached to an anchor or anything anymore. They're just dragging it as they move the ship out. That is what the ocean-going tug is going to tack up to for her tow down to Brownsville. But we not only have fewer carriers that can patrol nowadays and go to hotspots, we also, I hope you guys can't hear this engine sound as much as we can. We also have no carriers left in mothballs. This was the last mothballed aircraft carrier that we had. So if one of our carriers gets sunk in war, there is no replacing her. There was waiting a decade for a new one to be built. Whereas this ready-built carrier that never received a SLEP upgrade, she never had a service life extension program. She only served for high 30s or low 40s years, whereas some of the Nimitzes are going to exceed 50 years of service. So in theory, she still had some life on her hull, could have been reactivated, and now we just don't have anything like that in reserve. Again, from this view, you get a really good idea of how much bigger this ship is, even than New Jersey. If you visited museum ships, she's almost a quarter bigger even than Midway, which is the largest museum ship. Right under the flight deck, you can see 5 portholes. That's her auxiliary conning station. We did make it there when we were taking parts off of. We filmed a video on Hornet a couple of years ago in that location. Very similar space from the Essex class carriers to Kennedy, and I assume on the modern nuclear ship. So if something happens to the bridge, you can come down and con the ship from which is actually the O2 level. The flight deck itself is the O3 level, if I remember correctly. It might be O4. So that's one level below that. The hangar deck is considered the main deck on American aircraft carriers. Here on this side, you can see one of the sconces projecting. That's where some of her defensive weaponry would have been mounted. She would have carried Sea Sparrows and Phalanxes primarily as her air defense weapon system. Although her carrier air wing would have provided the bulk of her both offensive and defensive firepower. All of her weapons have since been removed. That would have been a challenge for the museum. It would have been getting those weapon systems back. As far as I know, there's no Sea Sparrow launcher at any museum or in any museum collection. And the number of Phalanxes, New Jersey's the only Iowa that has a complete set of real Phalanxes. Iowa has made great replicas. Missouri has 1 or 2, and I don't think Wisconsin has any. So they're maybe laying around for Kennedy to be able to take and to be turned into a museum.
Tell about the tugboat we're on.
And so once again, we are on Teresa McAllister. This is one of the tugboats that helped move Battleship New Jersey. And you'll see both a combination of Moran tugboats with the white M on their funnels and McAllister tugboats with the white stripes on their funnels. These are all Philadelphia-based tugboats as far as I know, and the McAllister tugs are the same exact ones that helped move New Jersey. In fact, Captain Joe Benton is on, right here on the bow. He is the person who moved New Jersey, and he is the person who's in charge of this effort as well. So it's him and his team, the same exact folks who worked with us just a couple months ago when it was significantly warmer, moving Battleship New Jersey. So great practice before they stepped up to this target. You can now see fully away from the pier. This, of course, is the fitting out pier where New Jersey was completed. It's where the big hammerhead crane used to be. So they could have just rolled stuff straight out of the turret factory back there behind us at the Navy Yard and railroad tracked it straight down the pier where the hammerhead crane could pick it up. And it was overloaded, but it was about 500-ton chunks for battleships New Jersey, Wisconsin, and Washington that were all completed here. Now, of course, the Philadelphia Navy Yard also has a history with aircraft carriers. 3 aircraft carriers were built here during World War II. Antietam, the first angle-decked American carrier, Valley Forge, and Princeton, the Essex-class Princeton, not the Independence-class Princeton. Although all of the Independence-class carriers were built barely down the river at New York Shipbuilding, and then completed here at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. New York Shipbuilding didn't do the electronics like the radars, the fire control systems, or the guns. Those were all put on here at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. And then more recently, one of the major tasks conducted at the Philadelphia Navy Yard before it closed down was the SLEP, Shipboard Life Extension Program, that extended the life of many of the conventional aircraft carriers. Kennedy was scheduled to get a SLEP, but never did, and was decommissioned younger than many of her sister ships. But ships like Kitty Hawk, also built at New York Ship, received the SLEP here. And then many of these carriers were mothballed here at the Philadelphia Navy Yard, and one by one, over the years, they've been towed away. Now Kennedy is probably the very, very last aircraft carrier that will ever come to Philadelphia. Philadelphia is not rated to take nuclear ships, which is why they were only supporting the conventional carriers, which is SLEPs and mothballing. And now that Kennedy is leaving, we might never see an aircraft carrier this far up the Delaware again. And that's hugely tragic. She is just one of many of the mothballed ships here that's being towed out right now, because you can see right across the pier from her, we've got a pair of Ticonderoga cruisers, brand new, tied up. They've still got workers on board doing some of the work to remove equipment, because they've just come in that recently. They're getting rid of a ton of the old ships that were here, including Kennedy, the old LKAs that were back there, and the Perry-class frigates that were once here in numbers. Now the tugboat's really moving. You can probably see that on the camera. Sorry for those of you getting motion sick. Those are all being towed out to make room for the Freedom-class littoral combat ships, some of which are only 6 years old when they're being brought in here, and the Ticonderoga-class cruisers, most of which are in their 40s. All of this past week, of course, Battleship New Jersey and some of the other museum ship staff have been allowed on some of the ships that are about to be towed out to make room for more Ticonderogas being decommissioned to take spare parts off of. We're going to talk about that in a future video, but they let us on the Grapple, Apache, and then the two amphibious ships, Whidbey Island and Fort McHenry. Again, we got about a week on board those 4 ships. We got some parts off of it. We'll tell you about that in a future video, so stay tuned. Maybe that'll be tomorrow night's video, maybe it'll be next week. Otherwise, we're circling around Kennedy. You can really tell from this view how this navy gray paint, while these ships are in mothballs, fades out to pink. You see that a lot less in the mothball ships that are still being held for future active use. That could potentially be reactivated, the ones that haven't had their names blacked out. But ships like Kennedy that have been stricken, they just let her rot, because there's no point putting the resources into her if they're not going to use her. She's just waiting to go to the scrappers. Some of you guys who came out to see us in dry dock earlier this year might remember that she was supposed to be scrapped in the middle of 2024. She was going to be towed out, I think it was May or June. But there was some sort of endangered bird nested in her mast. It might have been an osprey or something like that, that gave her a 6-month reprieve until the chicks had hatched. You can see, much like New Jersey, Kennedy's mast has been cut off. Not quite as low as New Jersey's. We are below or downriver from the Ben Franklin, the Walt Whitman Bridge, which only have clearance of about 150 feet. All the bridges from here down past Wilmington, going back out to the Atlantic Ocean, are 175 feet of clearance. They still had to pull off her radar antennas and the upper part of her mast. Those are currently laying on the flight deck. Actually, looking right here in the center of the flight deck, you might see some lattice work of one of the structures that's been cut off laying there. So things like her anchors, the masts, they're all there, and they're going to be taken with the ship and scrapped. It's essentially just help the scrappers by getting them off and leaving them there. Here you can see Reef McAllister. The ships on this starboard side are starting to pull her out away from the pier. I suspect we're at the point of the evolution where they're going to rotate her around. Her stern is nearly facing downriver in the direction we need to go, so they're probably going to pull her around 180 to get her bow lined up in the proper direction. This is the exact same thing that we had to do with New Jersey when we moved her, and those of you who watch those live streams or any of the videos probably saw that pirouette that the ship did in the middle of the channel. It's impressive seeing it on a ship that's about 1,100 feet long. You can also get a good view of her color scheme. They overhaul the same exact colors that we painted New Jersey in when we were in dry dock. Even though those weren't her colors in mothballs. We're now coming around the port side of the vessel for the first time. This is the side of the vessel that was tied up alongside the pier. So again, back here at the stern, you can see one of the sponsons that would have held her armament. You can see these little cradles all along the sides of the ship. Those would hold the plastic canisters for inflated life rafts. As the ship sinks, they will automatically deploy at a certain level. They're Mark 8 25-man life rafts. You can see there would have been a ton of them. Actually, here's a canister here on Teresa McAllister. Same purpose, just significantly smaller. The ship, much like New Jersey, would have carried something like a quarter or a third more canisters than her crew. Her crew would have been about close to 3,000 sailors as ship's company, and about 2,000 sailors embarked as part of her embarked air group. So somewhere around 5,000 total.
Can you remind us what we're doing today?
Yeah, so for those of you just tuning in, we are on Teresa McAllister, one of the tugboats that helped move Battleship New Jersey a couple of months ago, and we are watching the last carrier at the Philadelphia Navy Yard get towed out for scrap. The former USS John F. Kennedy, CV-67. She is the last aircraft carrier in mothballs in the United States. She was the last conventional carrier built. She's the last one left, and she is on her way to Brownsville. As of about a half hour ago, she started her last voyage that's going to take her down the Delaware River, down the Atlantic seaboard of the United States, through the Caribbean, and to Brownsville, Texas, which is in the extreme southern part of the state. From here, you get a good view across the flight deck at her starboard side superstructure. Again, you can see that the starboard side hull numbers have been blacked out. We are on the side that has the angled flight deck. Of course, carriers like this have 4 catapults. That's been pretty common on American supercarriers. There are 2 that go straight to the bow and 2 here that come off the angled flight deck. So you could launch 4 aircraft relatively quickly as you're positioning new aircraft. This angled deck, of course, also allows aircraft to land and be launched at the same time. You're landing at an angle over the fantail. When you hit the deck, you slam the throttle to the wall so that if you miss one of the 4 arrestor cables on the fantail, you will take back off across the forward deck. You can circle back around and attempt another recovery. But at the same time, that leaves the forward part of the ship open. If you need it as a deck park for aircraft that have landed, you haven't been able to elevator them down below yet, or if you need that to be launching aircraft at the same time as you recover, because you've got an ongoing series of strikes or training operations. Here, a little bit further past the starboard side, you can see one of her 4 elevators. Cut out are some sliding doors that would open. On the deck edge, pull the planes in. There's enough room on the elevator for, I believe, 2 FA-18 Hornets at the same time. And I've heard that it's something like 8 or 16 cables on the elevator, that it can hold that much weight even if all but 2 of the cables have been snapped or broken. These carriers have 4 catapults, 4 arrestor cables, 4 elevators. The other 3 are on the starboard side of the ship. We're just looking at the port side here.
Why didn't they reef her?
So, a question we just got is, why isn't she being turned into an artificial reef? As far as I know, nobody has expressed an interest in that, but this ship is close enough to our modern aircraft carriers that we wouldn't want foreign nationals to be able to dive on her. Only one American supercarrier has been sunk rather than cut up for scrap. That's America. She was sunk in weapons testing.
Oh, Risky Convention.
And she was sunk specifically in extremely deep water. So you she couldn't go down and see the effects of those weapons on her or get inside and see some of the features. We talked about this earlier in the video, but some of you guys are just tuning in. Kennedy is heavily modified from the base Kitty Hawk design that she started life as. So during her initial construction, they made significant modifications, particularly to her engineering plan, to prototype some of the subdivision that is still used on the Nimitz and Ford class carriers today. And so when we were allowed on board in 2018 to strip parts, we were not allowed in the engineering main spaces. So put her as a reef, people could go down and look at that, and that's not something that anybody wants. Only one aircraft carrier is used as an artificial reef, that's USS Kennedy. She was sunk back in the early 2000s off the coast of Florida. And she is, of course, a World War II era aircraft carrier. So there's not so much that can be learned from her. Circling around the stern of the ship again, this platform back here would be for testing jet engines. You can remove them from the aircraft, bring them back here, light them off, make sure that after you've done your maintenance, they're working right before you plug them back into the aircraft and send them to the flight deck to launch. The basic features of this ship are almost exactly the same layout as you're seeing on modern aircraft carriers like the Nimitz and Ford class. The most striking difference, of course, besides the fact that she's got a funnel as part of her superstructure, and the nuclear carriers don't have that, is that on American aircraft carriers, the superstructure has progressively marched backwards through the subsequent classes. From World War II, where it was fairly far forward, which is better for navigating the ship, to the present day, where the Ford class has it pretty close to the fantail, where it's better for doing flight operations. See a big crane back there. Looks like the tugs at the bow here are starting to push her. Now she's in the channel. Those back here are pretty slack. So they're still pushing her in her rotation.
We're getting some questions about how expensive it is to run an aircraft carrier as a museum. It takes us $10,000 a day, according to our website.
Yeah, so we've got some questions about how expensive it is to run an aircraft carrier as a museum. For Battleship New Jersey, in 2025, we've got something like a $6 million budget for the year. It's a little bit over $10,000 a day to operate the ship. That covers everything: staff, heating and air conditioning, all those sorts of things. The maintenance cost, it's kind of extrapolated. Obviously, certain times of the year it's more expensive to operate than others. But that's a rough estimate. I honestly couldn't tell you what that number is for, say, a ship like Midway, which is the closest comparison to this. But again, even Midway is almost a quarter smaller than this by weight, and close to 200 feet shorter. So this ship is nearly twice the displacement of the battleship. So you're potentially looking at twice the cost of operating. An Essex class aircraft carrier has something like 4,000 compartments. New Jersey has 1,600. Something this much bigger than an Essex probably has even more than 4,000 compartments. So you're looking at way more work to restore her. And then a lot of preserving a museum ship involves having a great location. Missouri is an incredibly successful ship because she's in Pearl Harbor. Likewise, Midway and San Diego. Where is there somewhere to put this ship that has appeared big enough to take an 1,100 foot long ship, is dredged deep enough to take a ship that I don't see her draft markers, but it's probably 30 or 35 feet, pretty comparable to Battleship New Jersey. Where are you going to find that? And then how are you going to get minimum 250,000 visitors a year to make this thing self-sufficient? Probably way more than that necessary. Intrepid and Midway both have about 1 million guests a year on a good year. and they're two of the more successful museum ships. So, where is there with the visitation that is going to give you that? How many visitors a year go to the state of New York or New York City? And then, is it 50 million? I don't know. But 1 million go on Intrepid, so that's something like 1/50th of the visitors come to the local museum ship. So where is there another city that could take a ship like this and meet all the criteria to be truly successful at saving her in the long term?
There is still a museum ship with the Kennedy name on it.
Keep in mind, there is a museum ship out there with the Kennedy family name on it. That is the destroyer Joseph P. Kennedy, the Battleship Cove, Massachusetts, Fall River, Massachusetts. And the name John F. Kennedy is already being reused. The new John F. Kennedy, a nuclear carrier, the Ford class, is currently under construction down in Newport News, Virginia. A good idea of the height of the hangar deck. You see the three big ovals here. Again, those are the elevators. These are the starboard side elevators before we were talking about the single port side elevator. So this gives you a rough idea of the height of the hangar. They're close to 3 stories tall. And the flight deck itself is actually a story tall. There's a complete structure in there, which is where your combat engagement center, your combat information center, your combat direction center, all that stuff is under the flight deck. A lot of the berthing for the air group is down there as well. So you can see all of that from the side of the ship here. Just look how much they dwarf these tugboats. These tugboats are 3 or 4 stories tall, depending on the vessel. And they're barely coming up to the hangar deck, which is then another 3 stories tall to get up to the flight deck.
Some questions about our weather today.
Questions about the weather. It was in the 20s according to my car thermometer on the drive in this morning. It is pretty cold. We're expecting some snow showers later this evening. The temperature's really been going down the last couple of days, which has made it a lot of fun during the open house that we had at the Navy Yard earlier this week, where we were on board some of the decommissioned ships taking parts off of. Of course, none of them have power, so very cold on there. Kennedy, of course, is a dead ship tow. She does not have any power right now. She does not have any propulsion of her own. It is Suzanne McAllister, the larger of the 3 tugboats at her stern, that is providing the rudder and the propulsion. Right now, if we look away from Kennedy, this is the pier where she was tied up. This was the old fitting out pier at the Navy Yard when they used to build ships. Blue Ridge, of course, was the last new construction completed here in Philadelphia, and she's now one of the oldest active ships in the fleet. This is one of the few piers around here that's long enough to accommodate a ship like Battleship New Jersey or Kennedy. It's where the big hammerhead crane used to be. In fact, the tracks for it are still there on the pier. So you can see the length of that. You can see 2 Ticonderoga class cruisers tied up there getting work done as they go into mothballs here in Philadelphia. It likely will not be long that this pier is left empty, the space that's been vacated by Kennedy, because as the ships are being pulled out intentionally right now to make room for the Ticonderogas and the Freedom class LCSs that are being brought in to be decommissioned. So now you can tie several Ticonderogas or Freedoms up here, especially if you nest them outboard like these 2 Ticos are.
Can you cover once again the story of Kennedy being decommissioned and how long she's been waiting at this pier?
Kennedy was decommissioned in the early 2000s as part of the drawdown going on then. She never received a SLEP upgrade, Shipboard Life Extension Program, which was being done right here at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. She was slated to receive it. Some of her sister ships, including Kitty Hawk, did receive it. She did not. As the newest carrier, newest conventional carrier, she was near the end of the list. So she was decommissioned about 40 years old instead of making it to 50 like many of her sister super carriers. And as such, she was decommissioned a little bit earlier than would otherwise be the case. In 2008, she came here, and she has been here since then. So what's that? 12 years or so? 16 years?
It's a service life extension program. We've been corrected.
Service life extension program. So she is now fully in the channel. She is facing. Oh, she is facing downriver, isn't she? Yeah, so she is facing away from Battleship, New Jersey. If you wanted to go towards us, you'd go that way under the Ben Franklin Bridge, which of course Kennedy's mast is too tall for right now by about 25 feet. So she is now in the right direction to start her final voyage down the Delaware River. From here, she's going to Brownsville, Texas, at the extreme southern tip of the state of Texas. Again, McAllister and Moran tugboats are all participating here. You can see Moran with the white M on the black funnel. You can see the McAllister boats with the white stripes. We've got, including Teresa McAllister that we're on, we've got at least 4 McAllister tugs and 1 Moran tug here participating in this. I don't remember there being any on the port side when we were over there. They're all going to be on the starboard side, which makes sense. That was the side that was away from the pier. So Suzanne McAllister here at the fantail, another one of the tugs that participated in Battleship New Jersey's move, is providing the propulsion and the rudder power as this is happening. The other tugs are nudging her as needed to get her into position.
Some folks on the internet thinks that she was slept 93 here.
That's what Wikipedia says. I didn't see that in her article.
She heads straight to Brownsville. It's the plan.
As far as I know, the plan is to take her down to Brownsville, Texas. Directly, I don't think she's making any stops along the way. So that'll have her going down. Far off in the distance, I'm not sure how well you can see the camera. Red old vessel with a yellow like crane across the fantail and a yellow superstructure. That is the ocean-going tug that's going to take up the chain coming from the centerline position at her bow for towing her down the river and open ocean.
You have to face the camera.
I can't see what's going on if I'm facing the camera.
I know, but they can't hear you.
You've got the microphone on.
It doesn't work. I don't know.
That's live.
Any idea how long it'll take to get her to Brownsville?
I have no idea. I know online it said how long it took Kitty Hawk to get there a couple of years ago. It's not a short trip, probably 2 weeks if I had to guess. And it'll be pretty similar to Kitty Hawk. There's a nice touch. Her hull number may have been blacked out because she was stricken, but her efficiency awards and her battle ribbons are still freshly painted. So she will go to the breakers with all of her awards and medals still up there. The folks down at the scrapyard, I can't remember the name of the company, it might be International Shipbreaking. There's a couple of scrapyards down in Brownsville, I think it's International that got the contract for Kitty Hawk and Kennedy. They do tend to take some of the parts that they cut off and sell them. I believe they sell some on eBay, and they might even have some on their website. I believe they melt down some of the steel. I've seen this for Kitty Hawk, and melt it into challenge coins and other things. So in about a year or so, keep an eye out. I expect some of the stuff that they've removed are going to start to go onto the market with that. What do you think? It feels like we're starting to make headway away from the pier.
I can't tell. Must be.
It seems like we've got a wake behind us. They're starting to give her some propulsion here. what did we get up to on Battleship New Jersey? Speed during our tow?
6 knots?
Yeah, for Battleship New Jersey, we hit somewhere around 6 knots.
Talk louder.
For Battleship New Jersey, we hit somewhere around 6 knots on our tow. I don't expect her to go any faster than that. She'll likely be slower than that for most of her trip down the Delaware here. I got nothing else to say. If they can't hear me, it makes no sense for me to talk anyway.
Yeah, we'll post photos and stuff too.
If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll answer them if we can. We're kind of live here. It was very short notice that she was moving at all. I'm not sure how publicly known this was. So we kind of ran out and stowed away on board Teresa McAllister to be able to get this footage. But we don't exactly have anything in front of us to read off of.
I think with the Nimitz and Fords that the Navy has reached the practical limit for the size of carriers.
Ooh, that's a really good question. I like that it's an opinion question too. I don't need need to look anything up. Do you think with the Nimitz and Ford class aircraft carriers, the Navy has reached the practical limit? I don't think so. If we build carriers any larger, it means that we have to expand all the infrastructure. The piers, the dry docks, things like that. And there's already a very small number of those that can accommodate the Fords and the Nimitzes. However, there are significantly larger civilian ships out there. And one thing that's been a constant trend with military warships is that they just get bigger over time. So I would not at all be surprised to see future classes of supercarriers get larger. Keep in mind, in Kennedy's day, when she was built, she would have an air group close to 100 aircraft. These are large jet aircraft that's very similar to what the Essex class carriers could have carried during World War II. But modern carriers like the Nimitzes and Fords have subtracted that. They're now in the 50s with the number of aircraft they can carry because of the increasing size and the maintenance requirements of those aircraft. So eventually, we're going to get into another shooting war and decide that that's not enough aircraft on board, and we need more capacity. It'll also be interesting to see what 6th generation aircraft do, because they are designed to fly alongside unmanned wingmen. So that the aircraft would be controlling a series of unmanned vehicles operating alongside of it. Presumably those would also be operating from the carrier. So the size of those will also determine the size of future air groups and carriers.
Do you know how far these tugs are going to take the ship?
I do not know how far these tugs are going to take the ship. These are all Philadelphia-based tugs. They tie up very close to the Navy Yard. Like I said, they're the ones that pulled New Jersey. They do a lot of the other projects around here. Some of them will likely go down the Delaware River a certain extent with Kennedy. A lot of the tugs, like Teresa McAllister that we're on right now, will turn around before the end of the day, actually before noon, and not leave the Philadelphia area. I'm not exactly sure at what point she's going to tie up to the ocean-going tug that's going to take her, but the ocean-going tug is, we can see her here. She's only a couple miles away, so I imagine relatively soon they're going to do a handoff. And some of these tugs will probably remain here just to keep an eye on her, keep bumping her side to side, but the ocean-going tug will take over the propulsion and the steering from Susan McAllister. She's currently doing that effort. When she gets out to the open ocean, she may well get up to higher than the 5 or 6 knot speed the Battleship New Jersey was doing on the river under tug power. They may well crank the speed up. I know Kidd managed to go a lot faster under tug than New Jersey once they got out into the Gulf of Mexico, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the same thing from Kennedy, even though she's a significantly larger ship. Kit, of course, normally a museum ship in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. She is currently in dry dock at, what's the name of that dry dock?
Thomasy.
At Thomasy Dry Dock down in Houma, Louisiana, which was, what, about 2 hours outside of New Orleans? Probably about halfway between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. We got to go down and see that, made some videos with our counterparts down there, Tim and Parks, our good friends. Those videos are up on both of our channels. Make sure you go and see them if you haven't.
We've got some questions if we will be covering the move of the United States.
We're very fortunate to be covering the move of Kennedy. Fortunately, we made some great relationships with the tugboat folks from the move on New Jersey over 2024 when we had the 4 tugboat moves of the battleship. And so they were able to tell us with relatively short notice that New Jersey was moving, and of course
Kennedy was moving.
that Kennedy was moving, and they were able to accommodate us on board so we could film it live. If, and it's a big if, we are this lucky again when United States moves, we will absolutely do that. If not, we will try and get footage from wherever we can, whether it's on the battleship's deck or on the drive down to the Navy Yard and take footage of one of the piers here. We will do our absolute best to get that footage. There is, of course, no current date set in stone. The United States had publicized a couple of dates. However, I believe the Coast Guard stepped in and said they wanted to see some other stuff done before she was moved. So I'm not sure when that is going to be completed and when she will start her voyage. Right now, it looks like the United States is not going to make meet the same sad fate as Kennedy. The best thing that can happen to a ship when she's decommissioned for the last time is that she's turned into a museum ship like Battleship New Jersey. If that can't happen, the next best thing is that she's turned into an artificial reef, which is the current plan for SS United States. And probably the worst thing that can happen is that she's cut up for scrap entirely. At least artificial reefs, the ship is still extant. You can still dive on them, although the number of visitors, of course, is significantly fewer than for a museum ship. Oh, hey, while I've got you all on, USA Today is doing a poll of the 20 best museum ships out there. So they picked 20 museum ships. They sort of picked ships from all around regionally. And you can go on there and vote every single day until the beginning of February. I think it's February 10th. You can vote every single day for your favorite museum ship. Battleship New Jersey, of course, is one of the choices that you can pick from.
There's links for it on our Facebook page.
There's a link for it on our Facebook page, or if you search museum ships on USA Today, you can get there. Vote for your top museum ship. Midway, which is the closest thing to a preserved museum ship to Kennedy, is on there. Our friends at Independence Seaport Museum here in Philadelphia are an option you can vote for. Our sister ship, Missouri, is an option that you can vote for. Was Iowa also an option? Iowa's an option, so you got 3 of the 4 Iowa-class battleships on there. You've got smaller ships on there. I really like that they use smaller ships. Constitution, of course. Historic ships in Baltimore, which is home of Constellation.
American Victory.
American Victory. I like that it's not all Navy ships. And the presidential yacht Potomac is also an option you can vote for. Next time I go to California, I'm going to go on board her. I'm really bummed I haven't been on board her yet. So 20 options to choose from. Remember, you can vote every single day between now and February 10th. So vote early, vote often.
What I think is happening here is I think the small boat here, they've got a buoy attached to the other end of the chain. They're going to attach it to the tug.
Okay. Yeah. If you look here towards the bow of the ship, you can see coming out of the center line anchor position is a chain. That's going to be the tow chain that they use. You can see down the river here, we're now stern to the ocean-going tug that's going to take up the tug. You can see a small workboat just off the bow, or maybe it's a pilot vessel. But they are fishing an orange buoy out of the water there. I suspect that that buoy is attached to the end of the chain when they're going to turn it over to that ocean-going tug. So we have, look over here. So we just crossed in front of dry dock number 3 where Battleship New Jersey was in dry dock. And this standing tree is right here behind me is slipway number 2 where Battleship New Jersey was built. And then right next to it is slipway number 3 where Wisconsin was built. Good to see those again. You can see a couple of folks down on the waterfront there wearing orange jackets watching Kennedy get towed out. Again, Philadelphia will likely never see another aircraft carrier. Built a couple during World War II, had several here for SLEPs, had several here in mothballs, and now that Kennedy is leaving and they're not set up to accept nuclear carriers, we'll likely never see another one here. So, looks like we're getting pretty close to the turnover here. I'm running out of things to say, so we're going to end this video right here. If anything else interesting happens, we'll come up with another video. But thanks for watching. Remember that Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. It's what allows us to save the vessel as a museum you can visit, as opposed to being towed away to the scrapyard. You can also support us by liking, sharing, subscribing so more people find about our channel. Their horn's a little bit quieter than ours. So other people find out about the channel and the cool stuff that we get to do, like this live news coverage of Kennedy sailing out. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.